Welcome back to the Limerick Post Show, and I'm delighted to be joined by Damien Clarke, psychologist and co-founder of Zeminar. How are you getting on?
Good, yes, very good from a very quiet Dublin. I live in the middle of the city, in the city centre, and it is eerily quiet outside, so I feel like everybody else, strange times.
I've seen your Instagram and of going around, and I have to say all the artwork in the city is stunning, which you'd never notice when you were just walking around the busy streets.
I know. So I've had a little bit of time in my hands. I use that 30 minutes outside to try and do something productive, try and do something that helps me to take my mind off myself. So Instagram is a useful tool for that. I'm enjoying it, yeah.
I am. I'm the same as well. Now, let's get right into it. You were the co-founder of Zeminar, which we're going to touch on in a little while. But first of all, you're a psychologist. Can you tell me why you went down that route and why psychology?
Yeah, so my original background is actually marketing and Japanese. I did that at DCU. Yeah, a bit random. I spent a year in Tokyo and kind of worked in marketing for six, 7 years. I didn't really feel it at the time. Probably just didn't get into the right role. Went off to Australia to find myself and try and get into some altruistic work, and that didn't work. So I came home, and I'd always had sort of an inclination that I'd like to get into psychology, but I didn't back myself really. I didn't apply myself particularly well in the leaving cert. Didn't get the points. So I suppose when I came back from Australia, I started to just try and get into different types of work, volunteer work. And one of the organizations I started to work with was the Samaritans. So I spent a bit of time there on helplines, listening to people throughout the country. And I just enjoyed the work. I just enjoyed being useful for the first time in what felt like a long time. So that was like my moment, my calling. So I decided to start from the start again. Went back to UCD, did a HTIP in psychology, which is like a fast track degree. And then luckily I applied for the doctorate in Trinity College in counselling psychology. So I'm way more interested in the people side of stuff. The counselling was probably more suitable choice for me. I'm less interested in the assessment side of things, if I'm honest. So I worked my way through 3 years of a doctorate, did a thesis on social media and body image, which was really interesting, focusing on teenagers. So it's been a long road, but it's a really worthwhile road. So if anyone's out there interested in psychology, I thoroughly recommend it, but be prepared for a lot of hard work.
I like the way though you went down the marketing route first to the Australia thing, so you just kind of shows that you don't need to make your mind up when you're in school. Like, you can change career at any point. I think that's a lot of people think that they have to do a college course and that's it, but you don't. You can change every couple of years if you want.
Yeah, so the average person's probably going to change their career 4 or 5 times now. I went back to college when I was 29, so I'd been out of college for 6 or 7 years at that stage, so I went back, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it might feel like a bit of a dent in the pride or the ego that you're going to have to go back, and you're watching people sort of go forward in their lives, but time passes. That's the way I was trying to say. Time passes, and the time will pass, and if you're doing something you don't enjoy, in 5 years time, if you don't change it, you're still going to be doing that thing. I understand that people have different commitments that they have to adhere to, but for me, I didn't have too many commitments other than finding something that I loved. So I was in that luxurious position of being able to sort of start from scratch and just go for it.
Absolutely incredible. And of course then Zeminar was born a couple of years ago. So for those that maybe probably heard of Zeminar, I think a lot of people have heard of it. For those who don't know what it is, can you tell us about it?
Yes, so Zeminar is a national health and wellbeing conference for young people. We're going into our 5th year. We've brought over 65,000 teenagers to our event. There's 3 main features to the event. The first is that we bring lots of speakers who cover everything from mental health, equality, sexuality, bullying, cyberbullying, grief. We talk about everything at the event. Some of the speakers are very well known. Other speakers are experts who just want to share a positive message. The second feature is that we try and bring every mental health and wellbeing organization to the event, plus sports associations and hobby associations, to come and showcase themselves so that young people can get connected to those organizations, get connected to the resources that are available to them, and also the teachers can get connected to the resources that are available. And the last feature then is we run workshops at the event. So these organizations run shorter workshops at the event. So instead of them have to try and travel throughout the country to meet all these young people, they run these workshops at the event. Plus there's a lot of fun at the event, a lot of music, dance, entertainment. People go seemingly in good form, and they come back every year. So by and large, we think it's a pretty cool event that young people seem to like.
It is a great event, and it's so good to think that for that age group to be kind of making mental health and well-being so important in their second level lives, and by the time they kind of go to university, they've learned maybe some really valuable tools. And I think it's so wonderful. And I know now it was due to be on here in Limerick with Blind Boys, and obviously it's been postponed given the circumstances. Is there any date maybe that you're going to reset, or you wait until all this passes to kind of finalize that?
I think like all we can say is it'll have to be the next academic year. So like it sounds like school isn't going to be back this side of the academic year, and I'm reading about the leaving cert and junior cert and how they're going to manage that. Seems like it's going to be quite difficult. So I would imagine that it's going to be definitely next year. So, but we want to come back to Limerick. We've had a great reception from teachers and young people in Limerick. We've had brilliant speakers from Limerick. The event we were going to was in the concert hall in UL, which was going to be fantastic. So there's a great appetite in Limerick for us to come, and we're really keen to get it down to that part of the country. It was the first time we were going to host it outside of Dublin as well, so we're disappointed that we haven't got an opportunity to kind of showcase our event in Munster, but that will happen.
Yeah, you'll be back, don't worry, we can't wait for that moment. Now, something we're going to talk about today, which actually I hadn't heard this phrase until you'd said it, so I'm really interested, and I think it's going to help so many people during this coronavirus and this time of cocooning. It is health anxiety. Explain to me what exactly is health anxiety.
So you might have heard of sort of people being a hypochondriac or something like that. That's kind of the, like, people use that as a kind of a slaggy phrase sometimes, you know, that person's a hypochondriac, don't listen to them. But like health anxiety is a really, really real thing that comes to my door quite regularly, where people have a preoccupation with a certain illness that they feel as though they might going to get, or sometimes they feel as though they have it already. Sometimes it's completely somatic, where they're imagining symptoms that they have, or sometimes they have a belief that they have an underlying illness and that they're convinced they have, and that sometimes even if they get medical reassurance, they're still convinced they have. So, for example, people might be convinced that they have a brain tumor, even though there's no evidence to support that. Or maybe someone is convinced they have cancer, and that could be because someone in their family had it before, or maybe they've read about something on the news. So they're convinced themselves that they have an illness. Very often they convince themselves that they have multiple illnesses throughout their life. So it goes from cancer to a brain tumor, and it moves on and on and on. So a really difficult thing for people to experience. I think in Ireland at the moment, a lot of people have a little bit of health anxiety. And I think when you're talking to people, so my work has moved from being face-to-face to phone support. And I would say that nearly every person I've contacted over the course of the week at some stage has convinced themselves that they have had the coronavirus. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting, because if we allow that to linger, then our symptoms get worse, and the symptoms are probably anxiety, and that can be very stressful. But I think what's really important is that we can all acknowledge that at some stage we're probably going to convince ourselves that we have coronavirus. If we talk about it a little bit more, you're going to be, I'm absolutely positive that if you talk about it more, you're going to feel better, because other people are feeling the same type of things around health anxiety right now. If you bottle up these feelings and these thoughts, they're going to get worse. You're going to feel worse. Your anxiety is going to increase. So I'm not talking about major solutions here. I'm just saying, have a chat with your friends about whether or not they have felt that they've had symptoms at some stage during the last week or two. And I bet you they'll say, yeah. And that just kind of normalize it. And you get such a relief about talking to your friends about something like that. There's something just therapeutic about even having a conversation with your friends about, have you been feeling this way, or did you get any symptoms? And I bet you people will say, oh yeah, I had a bit of a runny nose there the other day, and I convinced myself I had coronavirus, and I didn't want to get out of bed. And then I started to worry, had I given it to anybody? And then I was, and then you can see how the worries just start to grow and grow and grow. And the more we worry, the worse we feel. So just air those thoughts that you have about how you're feeling with other people right now, and that will help.
Because I'm the same now. It's funny when someone mentions one of the symptoms, I'm like, have I got a temperature? Have I got a headache? Have I got all these symptoms? But I have to kind of bring myself back, and I say to my friends too. And then I found really helpful was I read an article from a girl who had coronavirus and has recovered. Mm-hmm. And when I was reading about her symptoms, I was like, no, I haven't had all of them. I've just kind of had like a little headache, or as you said, a little sniffle out for a walk. So I think, it is kind of frightening, because I think they're obviously the news is being so very informative, but also quite, I suppose it is quite stark and negative what's being like what's shown to us. So I think that's what's kind of making us all nervous. And I think it's, yeah, as you said, talk about it and kind of, you know, if you have a headache, it could be just from sitting inside too long. Like get out and get a bit of fresh air, have a glass of water.
That's it. So like during the day, on a normal day, you are going to sniffle, you're going to have a headache, you're going to feel out of breath if you go up the stairs too quickly. You know, you might have left the heating on. There's all these things that could lead you to think you have, you know, coronavirus. The difference now, as opposed to previously, is that we focus on these symptoms. So we exclusively focus on, oh, I have a headache. And instead of just letting that drift out of our consciousness, now we become very aware of it and we focus on it and we worry about it. So if you have these symptoms or a little feeling that seems a little bit unusual, just let it go. Don't try and focus on it throughout the day, because that's when you start to convince yourself there's something wrong with you. I even tested myself this week because I had about 2 hours there, I think on Tuesday, where I had too much time on my hands and I didn't prepare my day properly the night before. I just felt a little bit off, and those thoughts did creep in. I was like, God, am I feeling a little bit under the weather here? You know, is my throat a little bit sore? So I did my usual thing. I tested myself. I went out for a run. I put on some music that I like. By the time I came back from the run, had a shower, had some food, I totally forgot about how I felt. And that enough was proof that I was like, okay, hold on. These were just some thoughts that were making me feel anxious. But when I distracted myself for a period of time, there was nothing to worry about. So that just proves whether it's, you know, real or not real as well. So sometimes I like to do these little tests for myself or with other people as well.
Yeah, actually, I was saying to you during the week, I wasn't feeling great like that. I forced myself to do a YouTube workout class, and afterwards I felt super, because I was serotonin and like had a shower, had food, and I was like, oh, I'm actually fine. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Things. Another thing I want to touch on before we go is procrastination. As I stumbled on that word. For a lot of people, I think people who are working from home, students who are trying to study, I think anyone that's, even those who are exam year who are trying to do classwork and, you know, obviously aren't in the classroom environment, I think it's something a lot of people are struggling with.
Yeah, and I can totally accept that, and I fall into that category some days as well. There's so much content online at the moment which is suggesting we should be doing this and we should be doing this, and there's yoga, and there's also sometimes you almost feel like a bit under pressure that you should be really performing very well right now and you should be super on top of things. It's not that way. This is a very unusual time for everybody, so be compassionate with yourself. If you're not performing to, you know, your best, that's okay too. This is very unusual. But I find what helps me is to have a plan the night before. So if I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do today? I'll stay in bed a little bit longer. You know, I'll start scrolling on my phone. Before you know it, it could be like 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And that kind of sets the tone for the day. So for me to have a good day, it actually starts the day before. I make a list, a diary of what I'm going to do, and I try and stick to that as much as possible. So I put a bit of shape around that day, and that means when I wake up, I'm not looking into this kind of vast space for the day, which just feels empty and actually can feel a bit daunting or anxiety provoking in itself. I shape my day the day before. Yeah. Another thing that I find really helps for people is to prioritize what actually needs to be done today. And I make a list and I put 10 things down on the list, and then I'll categorize for what actually needs to be done. And I'll list down in a priority what needs to be done. And I'll start with the thing that actually has to be done. Very often things don't actually need to be done that day. They can be left for later. So I would always say, like, give yourself a break. But if something actually needs to be done, you will get it done. If it's not that important, you know, it's okay to put it off a little bit. But procrastinating, I suppose, when we keep doing it, we kind of feel kind of negative about ourselves. I think that the hardest part is to start. But once you start, it feels good. And then that creates a bit of momentum. You get some sort of positive feedback in yourself from getting stuck into things. So make a list the night before, prioritize what needs to be done, and then just get started.
I suppose for parents probably with national school children, it's very important to make kind of a list of schoolwork, but also activities that kind of can mix up the day so that they can kind of enjoy school time.
Yeah.
For secondary school kids, it's to kind of maybe pick out their subjects and maybe so either change up. Would you advise to stick with one subject a day, or would you mix it up with maybe a few different subjects in the day?
Yeah, I suppose I get a sense that the schools are trying to follow the program that they typically run. So I would imagine that they're doing all of their subjects throughout the day. They're trying to follow a typical day. You know, if you're a young person and you're able to be online and focus with your teacher from say 9 to 3:30, I think that's a fairly large chunk of your day being in front of technology already. At that stage, you know, personally, I wouldn't be able to do much more in front of a computer or on my phone, you know, after that kind of 6 or 7 hours, you know, staring into a screen. That seems fairly excessive as it is. So if you're a young person and you're able to do that, then put down your technology and try and go for a walk, try and engage with your family, do jigsaws, whatever, try things that are a little bit different, learn the guitar, whatever. But I suppose it'd be difficult to be online for too much longer. But I suppose your question is, you know, should we stick to the same subject or should we mix it up? It really depends on the person.
Brilliant. Damien Clarke, no, it's an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and I know we've got so much more we could talk about. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask parents, students to leave questions below this interview, and we're going to maybe get to them some other day as well and kind of do more personalised questions for people and answers.
That's right. Sounds good.
Before you go, where is the best place to find you across social media if anyone wants to interact, or Zeminar, yourself?
Yeah, just Zeminar.ie. We're fairly big on Twitter. We're pretty poor on Facebook and our Instagram, but we're always responding to things. So if you just search Zeminar in any of those platforms, we'll come up and we will get back to you. So if anyone has any questions, psychology based, happy to get back to your viewers, your listeners. So yeah, please do connect. If you're struggling with anything, happy to share my insights, thoughts, do a bit of signposting, whatever.
Absolutely incredible. Damien Clarke, thank you so much for chatting to the Limerick Book Show today.
Thanks, Meghann. See you, bye.